Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. Do not be afraid.
2,000 years ago, a man walked up a hillside in Galilee, sat down among ordinary people, and said things that the world had never heard before. Not in a temple, not in a palace, not before kings or priests or powerful men. On a hillside, among fishermen, farmers, the poor, the sick, the searching. And what he said that day we call the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapters 5, 6, and 7. 3 chapters, perhaps 15 minutes to read aloud, and yet these words have shaped more lives, inspired more movements, challenged more empires, and comforted more broken hearts than almost anything ever spoken. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Not the powerful, not the certain, not the ones who have it all together. The poor in spirit, the ones who know they are empty, the ones who come with nothing. Theirs is the kingdom. That one sentence, in that one moment, turned every human power structure upside down. And it was just the beginning. You know that feeling, when life gets so heavy that you forget what light even felt like. Jesus knew that feeling too. He was not speaking to people who had everything figured out. He was speaking to people living under Roman occupation. People who had lost harvests, lost children, lost hope. People who woke up every morning not knowing if today would be harder than yesterday. And to those exact people, he said something extraordinary. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Not blessed are those who have it together, not blessed are those who never fell apart. Blessed are those who mourn, which means your grief is not a sign that God has abandoned you. Your pain is not evidence that you are doing something wrong. Your tears are not weakness. They are, according to this teaching, the very place where comfort finds you. Not after you heal, not after you figure it out, not after you put yourself back together. Right there, in the mourning itself. That is where he promised comfort would come. Now here is something that might surprise you. The very next thing Jesus said was not about religion. It was about you. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. In today's world, meek sounds like weak, like someone who gets pushed around, someone who never speaks up, someone who loses. But the original Greek word Jesus used was praus, and it meant something completely different. It described a horse that had been trained, powerful, strong, capable of great force, but that power brought under gentle control. Meek did not mean powerless. It meant power held with gentleness. Think about the people in your life you genuinely respect. Not the loudest ones, not the ones who force their way through every room, but the ones who are quietly, consistently strong, who speak carefully, who listen fully, who never need to prove anything. That is what Jesus was describing. And he said, those people inherit the earth. Not the aggressive, not the forceful, not the ones who take what they want, the gentle ones, the ones the world constantly overlooks. Jesus looked at them and said, you will outlast all of it. Let me ask you something personal. When was the last time you genuinely hungered for something good? Not food, not comfort, not success, something right, something just, something true. Jesus said, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. That word hunger in the original Greek was not casual. It described the deep physical ache of someone who has not eaten in days, a hunger that consumes you, that you cannot ignore, that drives everything you do. Jesus was saying, if you have that kind of hunger for what is right, if injustice genuinely disturbs you, if you cannot make peace with the world as it is because you can see what it could be, that hunger is not a burden, it is a blessing. Because people who stop caring, stop hungering, stop changing anything. But people who carry that deep ache for what is right, they are the ones who actually move the world. And Jesus looked at those people and made them a promise. You will be filled. Not maybe, not eventually, not if you earn it. You will be filled. If you are someone who still cares, still hopes, still believes things can be better, this verse was written for you. Here is one that stops people completely because it asks something almost impossible. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. And then, a few chapters later, Jesus goes even further. Love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. Now, before you scroll past that, sit with it for just a moment. Because Jesus was not speaking to people who had easy lives. These were people living under Roman occupation, people who had genuine enemies, real oppressors, real injustice being done to them every single day. And he did not say, pretend it does not hurt. He did not say what they did was acceptable. He said, love them anyway. Not because they deserve it, but because hatred is the heaviest thing a human being can carry. Because the person who wronged you is living rent-free inside you every moment you hold on to it. Mercy is not weakness. Forgiveness is not saying what happened was okay. It is choosing your own freedom over your right to stay angry. And Jesus promised something remarkable. The mercy you give finds its way back to you. Not always immediately, not always from the same person, but it comes back. Now Jesus says something that feels almost too simple. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Pure in heart. What does that actually mean? It does not mean perfect. It does not mean never struggling, never doubting, never falling short, because if that were the standard, no one would qualify. In the original Hebrew understanding, a pure heart meant an undivided heart, a heart that was not pulled in 20 directions at once, not performing goodness for an audience, not being kind because someone is watching, not praying to be seen praying, just genuine, honest, whole. Jesus was describing something we all recognize when we see it, that rare person who is exactly the same whether anyone is watching or not, who does not have a public version and a private version of themselves, who is simply real. And he said those people see God, not in some distant future, not only after death. They see God now, in the ordinary moments, in the face of a stranger, in the quiet of an early morning, in the unexpected kindness of someone who had no reason to be kind. When your heart is undivided, you start noticing what was always there. You were just too distracted to see it before. We are halfway through the Sermon on the Mount now, and Jesus is about to say something that might be the most countercultural thing in the entire teaching. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. Not the peacekeepers. There is a difference. A peacekeeper avoids conflict at all costs, stays quiet when something is wrong, looks the other way, keeps everything comfortable on the surface even when something underneath is broken. A peacemaker is different. A peacemaker walks into difficult situations, has honest conversations, says the hard thing with gentleness, stays in the room when everyone else leaves, chooses the harder path of genuine reconciliation over the easier path of comfortable silence. Think about the people who have brought real peace into your life. Were they people who avoided hard conversations, or were they people who loved you enough to have them? Peacemaking costs something. It requires courage, patience, a willingness to be misunderstood. And Jesus called those people children of God. Not the ones who had perfect theology, not the ones who followed every rule, the ones who did the hard, quiet, unglamorous work of bringing people back together. If that is you, if you are someone who stays when it is easier to leave, Jesus saw you right there on that hillside, and he called you by name. Now Jesus reaches something that nobody expects. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. This one is uncomfortable because it does not promise that doing the right thing will make your life easier. It promises the opposite. Jesus was being completely honest with the people on that hillside. He was not selling them a comfortable life. He was not promising that faith would remove all difficulty. He was saying, sometimes doing what is right costs you something. Sometimes standing for what is good makes you unpopular. Sometimes choosing integrity means choosing the harder road. And he looked at the people who already knew this from experience, people who had already paid a price for trying to live with honesty and decency, and he said, I see what that cost you, and it was not wasted. Now, here is what is remarkable about this. The Sermon on the Mount begins and ends with the same promise. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The poor in spirit at the beginning, the persecuted at the end, both receive the same promise, which means Jesus was saying something profound. The kingdom is not reserved for the powerful, the comfortable, the certain. It belongs to those who showed up anyway, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. Now Jesus shifts completely. He moves from the Beatitudes into something even more personal. He looks at the ordinary people on that hillside, fishermen, farmers, mothers, the tired and the struggling, and he says something that must have stunned them. You are the light of the world. Not you could be someday if you get everything right. Not you were before you made mistakes. You are, right now, as you are. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. A lamp is not lit and then placed under a bowl. It is placed on a stand, so it gives light to everyone in the house. Jesus was not describing a select group of spiritual elite. He was not talking about priests or teachers or religious professionals. He was talking to the people sitting in front of him. The same kinds of people who watch videos like this one, who carry quiet doubts alongside genuine faith, who are trying their best in circumstances that are sometimes genuinely hard. And he said, you are the light. Not a reflection of someone else's light, not a borrower of light, not a receiver waiting for light to arrive. The light is already in you. And the only question he asked is whether you are letting it shine. Now, Jesus teaches something that has comforted people for 2,000 years, and it is perhaps the most practical thing he ever said. Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Simple words, but consider who he was saying them to. People with genuine reasons to worry. Farmers dependent on rain that might not come. Families living under Roman taxation that could take everything. Mothers wondering how they would feed their children next week. These were not people with easy lives. Jesus was not speaking to the comfortable. And yet he pointed to something they could see right in front of them. Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store in barns, and yet they are fed. Consider the lilies of the field. They do not labor or spin, and yet Solomon in all his glory was not dressed like one of these. He was not saying, do not plan, do not work, do not prepare. He was saying, do not let fear of tomorrow steal the life you actually have today, because worry has never added a single hour to anyone's life. But presence, genuine presence in this moment, that is where life actually happens. Right here, right now. This breath, this moment, this day. That is enough. We are almost at the end of the Sermon on the Mount now, and Jesus closes with something that brings everything together. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened. 3 words: ask, seek, knock. But notice something beautiful about these 3 words in the original Greek. They are not one-time actions, they are continuous ones. Keep asking, keep seeking, keep knocking. Which means Jesus was not describing a single desperate prayer in a moment of crisis. He was describing a way of living, a posture, a continuous, ongoing conversation with God that does not stop when the answer does not come immediately. Because most of us have knocked on doors that did not open right away. Most of us have asked for things and waited longer than felt bearable. And Jesus knew that. He was not promising instant answers. He was promising that the asking itself matters, that the seeking itself changes you, that the knocking itself keeps you oriented towards something real. And then he said something that every parent in that crowd understood immediately. Which of you, if your child asks for bread, will give them a stone? If you, imperfect as you are, know how to give good things to your children, how much more does your Father in heaven? That is not a theological argument. That is a hand on your shoulder, telling you, you are not forgotten. And now Jesus reaches the end. After everything he has said, the poverty of spirit, the mourning, the meekness, the hunger for what is right, the mercy, the pure heart, the peacemaking, the light within you, the freedom from worry, the continuous asking and seeking and knocking, he closes with something simple. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on rock. Notice what he did not say. He did not say, everyone who perfectly understands these words, everyone who never doubts, everyone who has the right theology. He said, everyone who hears and puts them into practice. Not perfection, practice. Which means this teaching was never meant to be admired from a distance. It was meant to be lived, imperfectly, repeatedly, getting up when you fall and trying again. And the promise is not that the storm will not come. The storm comes for everyone. The promise is that what is built on this foundation holds. Through grief, through uncertainty, through the hardest seasons life brings, it holds. So wherever you are tonight, whatever you are carrying, whatever storm is currently beating against your life, you heard these words today. That is already the beginning.